Welcome viewers, Reverend Dr. J.W. Morrison, Theologist, New South Wales, Australia. Enmeshment and blurred boundaries. Emotional incest explained. February 10, 2020, by Fabiana Francisco or Franco, PhD. Just trying to get this word out there to help people. The people in it, the people on the end of it. Let's go, viewers. Emotional incest, covert emotional incest, also known as covert incest, has nothing to do with incestuous sexual abuse. Rather, it is an unhealthy emotional relationship between a parent and a child that blurs boundaries in a way that elevates the child into an adult role. The parent looks to the child for emotional support. And this can happen because they fall out with the men in their lives, or they've been abused, or it just hasn't worked out well for them. A lot of these women are for the streets. They just want to come and go and pass between partners, so they actually surrogate their children and just get sex at opportunities that afford them. They will try relationships, but once covert emotional incest exposes itself, the partners will be onto what they're doing, and that will be the end of that. Excuse the little puppy in the background. It's my daughter's. She's a policewoman. There he is. Little Hank, she called him. If he makes a little bit of noise, I do ask you to forgive me. But I've got to get this word out. In some cases, the parent also seeks practical support from the child. And they will parentify the child, which means they'll give them parental duties. I can remember when my sister and I were very, very young, we lived at a place called South Stratfield. We were only in primary school. Mum used to work till 5, 6 o'clock at night. We used to do all our stuff ourselves. I used to run the streets, canals, all the way to Burwood, all the way all over the place. I used to get belted and smacked and all that sort of stuff. So, in an emotionally incestuous relationship, a child is expected to meet the needs of the parent rather than the parent meeting the needs of the child. So, I've said this before and I'll say it again. The parent becomes the child when it's full blown, and the child becomes the parent. This type of relationship, which is similar to enmeshment, is inappropriate and can be and will be psychologically damaging to the child and to the parent. I've had parents that have said, I think I feel like I owe these people, and they run around wifing these young boys, and they do expect emotional supply in return. Emotional incest occurs when the parent does not have their needs met by a romantic partner, and it occurs when they do have their romantic needs met by a partner. This is extreme overt, covert emotional incest, where they don't care if they've got a partner or not. They're just using the partner for sex and intimacy, and then going back and remaining in their position as wife to their adult children, or husband or wife, whatever the case might be, or when the family dynamic is broken. Substance abuse, infidelity, and mental health issues tend to increase the dependency of the parent, and the parent will pass these habits on to the children to ensure that she has her hooks into them, gives her a sense of security, and she realizes that they're probably not going to go anywhere. because she disables them. And this gives her a sense of identity as well, and security, knowing that there'll always be a DNA sibling, not sibling, child or spawn hanging around. These people are usually dysfunctional, they can be narcissistic, and unfortunately a lot of times these parents, these single mums, pass from one relationship to another, and the young adult children watch this as an example, and there ends up being resentment, estrangement, back to it's sort of manic depressive. 1 minute it's all on, the next minute everybody's sad, up, high, low, high, low. But the enmeshment remains. The incest, molestation, emotional conditioning stays. What does emotional incest look like? Emotional incest occurs when the child believes that they are responsible for their parents' emotional well-being. And this is interchangeable as well. I've been on date nights at my partner's place, and they've been completely interrupted by the infantile mentality of the adult child. They'll bung on and feign suicidal thoughts and all this other stuff. It's usually drug-related, and they'll write it off as some kind of mental disorder, which it possibly is, but it's usually relative to the domestic culture in which they live in and mindset. Excuse me. Okay. This can happen when the parent talks to a child as though the child were an adult. The parent may request advice from the child regarding adult issues, and can even place the child in the role of a therapist, and again, this happens all the time. Children have no clue and have no right to be involved in this kind of business. But they get involved and they end up with all sorts of issues on their hands. When the parent is sad or lonely, it's up to the child to make them feel better, or at least feel their feelings with them. The boundaries are blurred and meshed. The child may lack any sense of emotional separation from the parent. They're very dependent on one another, and this sabotages their personal relationships. And once you've cottoned onto it, it will become overt if you're around long enough, and it's really destructive for these people. And if you're the third wheel, is emotional incest a form of neglect? Well, it's actually a form of abuse. Elevating a child to the role of supporter, an adult can lead to neglect and emotional abuse. A parent who is overly dependent on a child can also be critical and neglectful. Parents who have transversed or inverted parent-child roles, transversed or inverted parent-child roles, which means the child can become the parent, can refuse or be unable to provide appropriate support for the child, especially if they're under drugs and other things. This can also result in a confusing mix of love and abuse. So the child's not sure, they don't know how to separate the senses of love from abuse. When a parent relies on the child's needs are not being met. Children are placed in the role of adults, often do not know how to ask for help. They understand that their parent is unable or uninterested in providing much support, so they deny their own needs. If you've got a golden child, a grandiose, self-important young adult male will often drain the emotions out of their mother for supply. Can get real deep, this, I'm telling you. I've seen the mother look up to these children with awe, just awestruck. They understand that their parent is unable or uninterested in providing much support, so they deny their own needs. Why some parents look to children for support? It is thought that early emotional deprivation can lead some adults to regard their children as parental figures. When divorce occurs, they can leave a vacuum that encourages a child to step in and do what they can to help the family. Parents with narcissistic personality, or NPD, may lack insight into how their behaviour affects their child. I've mentioned this before. They may also justify or deny their behaviour and refuse to see that their child may be suffering. Well, I know they're all suffering, but they can't help it. Narcissistic parents and parents who engage in emotional incest often need praise from their children. Questions such as, "Am I a good mother?" or "How much do you love me?" can place a child in a precarious position, as a child is not allowed to complain or express their own needs instead. But I've noticed the opposite to this. As I say, the golden child will express illegitimate needs, infantile needs. Instead, the parent is the primary one who needs care. This unspoken understanding that the child's needs are not as important as the needs of the parent can have lasting effects and can cause difficulties in adult relationships. It affects their adult relationships. A parent with addiction may also develop an inappropriate reliance on their child. The child can assume the role of caretaker, yes, both, when the parent is intoxicated and when the parent is sick and recovering from using substances or alcohol. Children of addicted parents often understand the parent is not capable of caring for them, and as a result they become the strong one in the family. The child may hide or deny their own needs even to themselves, as they know the parent is unavailable to provide care. And what happens is, if you come into one of these families, the child feels like the parent owes them something, that you're stealing away the debt. You're taking away their payment from the parent, as it were, because of everything they've sacrificed for the parent. Emotional incest, child outcomes. The impact of emotional incest on adult children can manifest in a variety of ways. They often have difficulties setting boundaries in relationships. They may also experience depression, shame, suicidal feelings, excessive guilt, anxiety, and social isolation. Emotional incest can rob a child of the ability to develop at a normal pace, as they are forced into maturity at an early age and denied the opportunity to experience appropriate and supportive relationships. When they reach adulthood, they can experience dysfunctional adult relationships that perpetuate the cycle of unhealthy relationships, and that's why a lot of these people are just weekend lovers. Their relationships don't last very long because they snap back to the covert emotional incestual relationship, which is always more important. Processing emotional incest, the role of therapy. Therapy allows you to understand and address the impacts of emotional incest. Underlying issues can be explored and healed in a non-judgmental and safe environment. A therapist can provide guidance for building appropriate, healthy adult relationships, as well as help with relationships with children. Many adults who experienced emotional incest as a child do not want to repeat the pattern. Therapy can provide guidance and positive support for parents who want their own children to experience healthy parent-child relationships. And this is Reverend Dr. J.W. Morrison, theologist, New South Wales, Australia. If you haven't already, subscribe to the channel. Bye for now.